My mother shoved me into the corner like a prop, warning me not to ruin my brother's luck with my presence. They have no clue the mystery investor they fear is standing right here, pouring their water. In 5 minutes, my brother will brag that he is the new partner. 5 minutes after that, he is going to find out what it feels like to be fired on the spot by the very person he thinks is invisible. My name is Scarlett Chapman, and at this exact moment, I was being treated less like a daughter and more like a smudge on a pristine lens that needed to be wiped away before the photo was taken. My mother, Celeste, dug her manicured fingernails into the fabric of my sleeve, steering me away from the mahogany conference table with a force that betrayed her calm. Socialite smile. We were in the primary boardroom of Crestfall Partners, a glass cage suspended 30 stories above the city, designed to make everyone inside feel like a god and everyone outside look like an ant. "You stay over there," Celeste hissed, her voice low enough to slide under the hum of the air conditioning, by the water station, and for the love of everything holy. "Scarlett, do not say a word, do not breathe too loudly, do not ruin your brother's luck. You have a talent for bringing the mood down just by standing there." I did not argue. I did not pull my arm away. I simply stepped back until my heels touched the cold drywall of the corner, blending into the shadows, just as she wanted. From this vantage point, I had the perfect view of the entire room. I could see the security camera blinking a slow red rhythm in the opposite corner. I could see the condensation forming on the crystal pitcher of ice water on the sideboard. And mostly, I could see them, my family, performing the final act of a tragedy they did not even know was being staged. My brother, Trent Chapman, was pacing the length of the floor in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was wearing a brand-new navy suit that probably cost $3,000. Money I knew for a fact he did not have last week. He adjusted his cuffs, catching his reflection in the glass, and flashed a grin that was all teeth and zero substance. "This is it, Pop," Trent said, turning to our father. "The big leagues, today. The golden boy of the Chapman dynasty finally ascends. Partner. Can you believe it? I am going to be a partner at Crestfall." My father, Wade, sat at the head of the table, or at least, the seat he had claimed as the head. He was trying to look like the patriarch of a business empire, leaning back in the ergonomic leather chair with his hands clasped over his stomach, but I saw the truth. I saw the way his left thumb kept twitching. A nervous tic he had developed when the creditors started calling the house phone 5 years ago. I saw the way his eyes darted to the door every time a shadow passed by in the hallway. He was trying to project power, acting as if this entire building was an asset he owned, when in reality, he was leveraged up to his eyeballs. "You deserve it, son," Wade said, his voice booming a little too loudly for the acoustics of the room. "They know quality when they see it. You have the killer instinct. Just like me." I almost laughed, but I kept my face perfectly neutral. Killer instinct. That was what they called Trent's inability to hold a job for more than 6 months. That was what they called his trail of failed startups and bad crypto bets. Every time Trent fell on his face, Wade and Celeste were there to put a cushion under him, calling it an investment in his potential. And now, they were about to make the biggest investment of all. I checked the analog clock on the wall. It was exactly 10 in the morning. The meeting was scheduled to start in 5 minutes. Celeste walked over to Trent, straightening his tie with a look of adoration that she had never, not once in 28 years, directed at me. "You look like a king," she whispered. "Remember, when the other partners get here, you hold your ground. You are bringing fresh capital. You are the savior of this firm." Trent scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Please, Mom, they need me." I heard through the grapevine that Crestfall has been bleeding liquidity for 2 quarters. They are desperate for new blood. I am doing them a favor by buying in. I lowered my eyes to the tray of glasses in front of me. Trent was right about one thing. Crestfall was bleeding. They were practically hemorrhaging cash, but he was wrong about the rest. They were not looking for a savior. They were looking for a scapegoat with a checkbook. And my brother, with his ego the size of the skyline behind him, had walked right into the slaughterhouse wearing a ribbon. Scarlett! Celeste's sharp tone snapped my attention back. I looked up. She was glaring at me from across the room. "Do not just stand there like a statue," she snapped, though she kept her voice hushed so the receptionist outside wouldn't hear. "Pour some water for your father, and try to look like you belong in a professional setting. Even if we both know you don't, you are just background noise. Scarlett, do not dream of being on the same level as your brother." I moved. I picked up the heavy crystal pitcher. The ice shifted against the glass with a solid clink. I walked over to the table, my steps silent on the plush carpet. I approached my father first. He did not look at me. He was too busy staring at the blank notepad in front of him, perhaps calculating how many months of interest payments he could cover with the signing bonus Trent had promised him. I poured the water into his glass. I watched the liquid rise, stopping exactly 1 inch from the rim. Not a single drop spilled. Then I moved to Trent. He was leaning against the table, checking his watch. Service with a smile. "Sis?" Trent quipped, not bothering to make eye contact. "Maybe after I sign the deal. I can get you a job here. We always need people to file paperwork or fetch coffee. You are good at the boring stuff." I poured his water. The stream was steady, clear, and cold. "I am good at risk assessment." "Trent," I said, my voice flat. He laughed. A sharp barking sound. "Risk assessment. Right. You mean being a pessimist. That is why you are still renting that shoebox apartment while I am about to buy a penthouse." The door to the conference room opened, cutting off his retort. A young executive assistant stepped in, clutching a tablet. "Excuse me. Mr. Chapman," she said, addressing Trent. "The representative for due diligence and compliance will be with you in a few minutes to finalize the capital contribution round." Trent puffed out his chest. "Excellent. Tell them I am ready." "I have arranged everything. They are lucky to have me." The assistant gave a tight, polite smile, the kind you give to a customer who is making a scene in a restaurant, and backed out of the room. "Did you hear that?" Trent turned to Wade, his eyes gleaming. "Due diligence. Just a formality. They are practically begging to take the check." I retreated to my corner. Placing the pitcher back on the silver tray, I folded my hands in front of me. I let my breathing slow down. I watched them celebrate a victory that had not happened yet. They saw me as the help. They saw me as the invisible sister, the one who worked in the unglamorous world of distressed debt and bad loans. They thought I was here because I had nowhere else to go. They did not know that the shadows are where the real work happens. Shadows are the only things that can slip through locked doors without a key. I looked at the clock again. 3 minutes past 10. My brother thought he was the new partner. My father thought he was the patriarch. My mother thought she was the queen mother. I picked up a napkin and wiped a microscopic speck of dust from the table surface, playing my part to perfection. But in my head, I was not serving them water. I was setting the timer on a demolition charge. "Just wait," I thought, staring at the back of Trent's expensive suit. "Just wait until you see who walks through that door." Growing up in the Chapman household, I was never starved, never beaten, and never locked in a closet to the outside world. We were a perfectly normal, upper-middle-class family. But inside those walls, there was a silent, suffocating classification system that defined my existence before I even learned to tie my shoes. I was the backup plan. I was the spare tire kept in the trunk, covered in dust, while Trent was the engine that everyone obsessively polished. Even when he wouldn't start, my parents did not abuse me. They simply rationed their belief. Every ounce of emotional capital, every spare dollar, and every word of encouragement was funneled directly into Trent. If I got straight A's, it was expected. If Trent managed to pass a class, he had already failed twice. It was a cause for a celebratory dinner at the steakhouse downtown. They called it supporting his spirit. I called it funding his delusion. By the time we were in our 20s, the pattern was set in stone. Trent flunked out of state college because the professors just did not understand his vision. He tried to launch a luxury streetwear brand that consisted of 3 printed t-shirts and $10,000 in unsold inventory sitting in our garage. He tried to become a high-end real estate flipper in a market that had already crashed. Every single time he hit a wall. Wade and Celeste were there with a checkbook and a fresh excuse. They told themselves they were investing in his potential. They refused to see that they were actually financing a bottomless pit. I went the other way. While Trent was chasing unicorns, I fell in love with the brutal honesty of mathematics. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through university without asking them for a cent. I did not want their help because I knew it would come with strings attached, or worse, with a lecture on how I should be more like my brother. I entered the world of risk analysis, and eventually, I found my niche in the cold, unglamorous sector of distressed credit and debt restructuring. My father hated my job. He called it boring. To Wade Chapman, a steady paycheck was a sign of a lack of imagination. He was a man addicted to the feeling of a bet. He did not want to earn money. He wanted to win it. He wanted the big score, the overnight success that would prove to the world he was smarter than everyone else. And because he could not achieve it himself, he projected that desperate hunger onto Trent. He needed Trent to be the golden goose so badly that he was willing to starve the rest of the farm to feed him. That desperation was exactly what led us to the disaster at Crestfall Partners. 2 weeks ago, Trent came home with the opportunity of a lifetime. He told us he had been invited to join the firm as a junior partner. The catch was a buy-in fee, $150,000. He called it a capital contribution. He said it was standard practice for high-level finance. I knew immediately what it was. It was a liquidity trap. Legitimate firms do not ask junior partners for 6-figure checks just to walk in the door unless they are desperate for cash flow. I did my own digging. I pulled Crestfall's public filings and saw the red flags that my father was too blinded by greed to notice. The firm was hemorrhaging money. They were not recruiting talent. They were selling seats on a sinking ship to anyone foolish enough to buy a ticket. I tried to tell them. I sat them down in the living room 3 days ago, armed with spreadsheets and market reports. I showed them that Crestfall was being investigated for compliance failures. I showed them that the partner buy-in was likely going to pay off old debts, not fund new investments. Celeste did not even look at the papers. She looked at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. She told me I was being negative. She said I was jealous that Trent was leaping over me on the corporate ladder. Wade was worse. He slammed his hand on the table and told me that I did not understand how the big boys played the game. He said I was too risk-averse, that I had a worker bee mentality. That was the moment the last thread of loyalty snapped. It was not the insults that did it. It was the realization that they were about to destroy everything for a lie. To get that $150,000, Wade was preparing to leverage the house. It was the only asset they actually owned, the one thing they had managed to pay off before Wade's career stalled. It was their safety net. And Trent had convinced them that he only needed the money for 24 hours to show proof of funds, and then it would be returned. 24 hours. That was the hook. I knew exactly what would happen. Trent would transfer the money. Crestfall would lock it up in a holding period. The firm would declare insolvency or restructure within the month, and my parents would lose the roof over their heads. I could have fought harder. I could have screamed. I could have called the bank and reported coercion. But as I looked at their faces, Trent's smug grin, Wade's greedy eyes, Celeste's dismissive sneer, I felt a cold calm wash over me. Why should I save people who refuse to be saved? Why should I keep acting as the safety rail for a family that keeps trying to jump off the cliff? I realized that if I stopped them now, they would just hate me for ruining Trent's big chance. They would blame me forever for the success he never had. The only way to cure them of this sickness was to let the fever break. If they wanted to gamble, fine. But I was done watching from the sidelines. I was an expert in distressed assets. I bought broken companies for a living. I stripped them down, fired the management, and sold the pieces for profit. My family was just another distressed asset. So, I made a decision. I would not block the transaction. I would not save Trent. Instead, I would own the consequences. I went back to my office that night and made a call to a contact who specialized in secondary debt markets. I located the primary holder of Crestfall's short-term liabilities, a lender who was nervous and looking to exit their position before the ship went down. I used my own savings, the money I had hoarded for years while Trent was buying bottle service, to set up a shell company. I bought the debt, and with it, I bought the controlling interest in the event of a default. I did not do it to be cruel. I did it because it was the only way to take the wheel before they drove the car off the bridge. But as I stood in the corner of the boardroom, watching Trent fix his tie, I had to admit there was a dark satisfaction blooming in my chest. They thought they were playing a high-stakes game of poker. They did not realize that I had already bought the casino. Trent believes he's about to become a partner. Wade believes he's about to become rich. But in reality, they are walking into a cage match, and I am the one holding the key. I am not the sister anymore. I am the creditor. And creditors do not care about childhood excuses. The entity I used to dismantle my family's delusions was named Marigold Ridge Holdings, LLC. It sounded pleasant, innocuous even, like a retirement community or a boutique flower shop. In reality, it was a special-purpose vehicle I had registered in Delaware 48 hours ago, designed with a singular function, to act as the jaws of a trap. Through Marigold Ridge, I had quietly acquired the majority of Crestfall Partners' short-term debt. It was not difficult. The original lender was a mid-sized regional bank that was terrified of Crestfall's balance sheet. They saw the same red ink I did, the cash burn, the looming insolvency, and they were desperate to offload the risk for pennies on the dollar when I approached them with a cash offer. They did not ask questions, they just signed. But I did not just buy the debt, I bought the covenants. I spent 6 hours the previous night with my lawyers, redrafting the enforcement clauses. We inserted a specific trigger, a springing control provision. In plain English, it meant that the moment Crestfall missed a liquidity benchmark, which they were currently missing by a mile, the voting rights of the primary creditor, me, would supersede the board of directors on matters of financial compliance. I was not just a lender anymore. I was the shadow board. I had the legal authority to freeze assets, veto hiring decisions, and most importantly, reject new partners who did not meet strict anti-money laundering standards. To execute the physical side of this takeover, I needed a face that was not mine. I needed someone who looked like he could audit your soul and find it lacking. I hired Miles Harrow. Miles was a legend in the world of forensic accounting. He was a former compliance officer who had pivoted to private fraud investigation. He was expensive, precise, and utterly devoid of small talk. I met him in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the Crestfall Tower an hour before the meeting. I handed him a dossier that was 2 inches thick. This contains everything. I told him, sliding the folder across the table. The email logs proving the partners are aware of the insolvency, the Know Your Customer protocols they have been ignoring, and the default triggers we are going to activate today. Miles flipped through the pages, his expression unreadable. You have been busy. And the target? My brother, I said, and my parents. They are walking into a buy-in scheme. I need you to play the role of the due diligence representative. The firm is expecting someone from the compliance office to finalize the deal. That is you. Miles looked up, his gray eyes sharp. You want me to stop the deal? No. I corrected him. I want you to facilitate it. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. This is the most important part. Miles, do not stop them. Do not warn them. I need you to push the compliance checks to the absolute limit. Specifically, the proof of funds. I knew Trent. I knew his habits like I knew my own handwriting. Trent operated on the philosophy of fake it until you make it. If you asked him for a document he did not have, he would not admit he did not have it. He would go home, open editing software, and create it. He had done it with his college transcripts. He had done it with his credit score when he leased his car. So, I built the wall exactly where I knew he would try to climb. We are implementing a digital-only verification policy. I explained to Miles. Tell them that due to new federal banking regulations, we cannot accept printed bank statements or PDF attachments. We need a direct real-time export from the banking portal, or a metadata-verified digital file sent directly to a secure server. Miles raised an eyebrow. You think he will try to forge proof of funds? I do not think. I said, I know. He needs $150,000 to buy the seat. He does not have it. He is planning to use the house as collateral, but the loan has not closed yet. He will try to present a doctored statement to buy time. When he does, I want you to catch him. I paused, letting the weight of the instructions settle. But Miles does not force his hand. Lay out the requirements. Let him believe he can outsmart the system. Let him choose to lie. Miles nodded slowly. He understood. This was not an interrogation. It was a suicide watch. There was one final piece of the puzzle, a detail I had uncovered during my deep dive into the family's finances the night before. I had pulled the title report on the house in Briar Glen, the house Wade and Celeste were so proud of. The one they claimed was free and clear. They were preparing to leverage it to get the cash for Trent. But when I looked at the county clerk's records, I found something that made my blood run cold. There was a cloud on the title, a secondary lien recorded 3 years ago, buried under a mountain of paperwork. Wade did not know about it. Trent certainly did not know about it. It was a secret that had been kept by the only other person with the authority to sign for it. I looked at the document on my screen, realizing that the rot in my family went deeper than just Trent's incompetence or Wade's greed. This was betrayal. And when Miles pulled this particular thread in the meeting, it was not just going to unravel alone, it was going to tear the family portrait in half. I closed the laptop and stood up. The stage was set. I walked back into the Crestfall building, took the elevator to the 30th floor, and slipped back into my role. I picked up the water pitcher. I checked the temperature of the room. I made sure the coasters were aligned. Scarlett, Celeste had whispered when I returned, try not to look so gloomy. We are about to make history. I looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered if she would still care about history when she realized her future was already owned by the daughter she ignored. I felt the heavy rectangle of my phone in my pocket. It was connected to the secure server Miles would be using. It had the admin codes to the Crestfall network, which I had secured as part of the debt purchase agreement. I had the power to shut down their email, lock their accounts, and revoke their access cards with a single tap. The door to the conference room opened. Miles walked in. He was wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it was cut from steel wool. He carried a leather briefcase and an air of absolute authority. He did not look at me. He looked straight at Trent. I poured water into a fresh glass. My hand steady. The water swirled, clear and innocent. The trap was open. The bait was set, and the prey was already licking his lips. When Miles Harrow walked into the conference room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He did not storm in, and he did not saunter. He moved with the efficient, terrifying silence of a surgeon entering an operating theater. He placed his leather briefcase on the table, the metallic click of the latches sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. He did not smile. He did not offer pleasantries. He looked at Trent not as a human being, but as a stack of paperwork that needed to be sorted and likely shredded. Trent, unable to read the room as always, practically leaped out of his chair. He buttoned his suit jacket with a nervous jerk of his hands and extended a palm that I could see was damp with sweat. "Mr. Harrow," Trent said, his voice pitching a little too high. "It is a pleasure. Truly, I am ready to get this moving. I am the new partner you have been hearing about. I bring a lot of strategic value to this table. Fresh energy, vision." Miles did not take the hand. He simply looked at it until Trent, flushing a deep crimson, slowly lowered it back to his side. "Strategic value is a projection, Mr. Chapman," Miles said. His voice was a monotone drone, devoid of any warmth. "It is a hypothesis. In my line of work, we do not deal in hypotheses. We deal in solvency. A title has no value if there is no liquidity behind it." Wade cleared his throat, a rumble meant to assert dominance but which only betrayed his anxiety. "Now, hold on a minute. The Chapman family has a reputation in this city. We have assets. We are standing. My son is not just some walk-in off the street. He is bringing the weight of our legacy to Crestfall." Miles turned his head slowly to look at my father. It was the look a biologist might give a specimen in a jar. Legacy is not a line item on a balance sheet, sir, Miles replied, and reputation does not clear a wire transfer. We are here to verify facts, nothing else. I stood perfectly still in the corner, holding the condensation-slicked pitcher of water. I saw Celeste's eyes dart toward me. She made a sharp, flicking motion with her hand, a gesture she used to summon waiters or dismiss housekeepers. "Scarlett," she hissed, her voice barely audible but cutting. "The table. There is a ring of water near Mr. Harrow's elbow. Clean it up, and for heaven's sake, stand back. Do not crowd the important people. You are breathing up all the air in the room." I moved instantly. I pulled a linen napkin from my pocket and stepped forward, as I wiped the pristine mahogany surface near Miles. I did not look at him, and he did not look at me. We were strangers, but as I polished the wood, I felt the electric charge of the setup humming between us. I was the ghost in the machine, and he was the executioner I had hired. Miles opened his briefcase and pulled out a single, crisp sheet of paper. He slid it across the table toward Trent. "This is the enhanced due diligence checklist," Miles stated. "Given the current volatility of the market and the specific nature of your buy-in, Crestfall has updated its compliance protocols. We require absolute verification on 4 points. 1. The source of funds. 2. The legitimacy of the transfer path. 3. A comprehensive litigation risk assessment. And 4. A conflict of interest declaration." Trent picked up the paper, scanning it with a dismissive sneer. He tossed it back onto the table as if it were a menu he did not like. "This is standard stuff." Trent laughed, though the sound was brittle. "Just red tape, bureaucracy. I told you, the money is ready. I am ready to sign. Why are we wasting time on housekeeping?" Miles stopped moving. He went perfectly still. "Housekeeping," Miles said softly, "is what happens after the mess is made. This is prevention. These formalities, as you call them, are the only things keeping people from sitting in the wrong chair. Or, quite frankly, sitting in a room with bars on the windows." The air left the room. Wade shifted uncomfortably in his leather seat. Celeste stopped smiling. Trent's jaw tightened. "Look, I get it. You have a job to do. But I'm telling you, I am good for it. The funds are in my account. I just need to initiate the transfer." I took a step back, resuming my position as the invisible servant. I was standing just behind Wade's right shoulder, close enough to smell the stale coffee on his breath and the fear radiating off his skin. Trent leaned in toward our father, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Assuming the hum of the air conditioner would mask his words, he was wrong. "Dad, it is fine," Trent whispered, his lips barely moving. "I fixed the statement this morning. I used the editor. It looks 100% real. They will never know the difference." Wade gave a stiff nod, his eyes fixed on the table, complicit in his silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. There it was, the confession. He had done exactly what I predicted. He had forged the bank statement to show $150,000 that did not exist. Likely planning to cover the lie once the loan on the house came through in a day or two. He was buying time with a felony. Miles, who had been arranging his pens with meticulous care, suddenly looked up. It was as if he had heard the whisper through telepathy. "Mr. Chapman," Miles said, addressing Trent with renewed intensity, "regarding the proof of funds, in the past, we accepted printed statements or PDF attachments sent via email." Trent nodded eagerly, reaching for his laptop bag. "Right, I have the file right here. I can email it to you, or I can print it out. I have a PDF generated this morning." Miles held up a hand. "That will not be possible," Miles said. Trent froze. "What do you mean?" "Due to a spike in document fraud within the sector," Miles explained, his voice smooth and cold as glass. "Our policy changed effective 8 this morning. We no longer accept static files. We do not accept PDFs, and we certainly do not accept printouts." Trent's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "To proceed with this signing," Miles continued, "I require you to log into your banking institution's secure portal right now. You will then export the transaction history and the current balance directly to our compliance server using a secure API link I am about to provide. Alternatively, you can download the live metadata file in front of me and transfer it via this encrypted drive. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut on a leg. But, Trent stammered, looking suddenly pale. It is highly irregular. My bank has strict security. I do not know if I can just. It is standard for a partner-level buy-in. Miles interrupted, cutting off the excuse before it could be fully formed. Unless, of course, the static PDF you have prepared does not match the live data in the bank? Wade looked at Trent, panic flaring in his eyes. Celeste looked at Miles, offended by the implication, but too confused to speak. Trent laughed again, a nervous, hacking sound. Of course it matches. Do not be ridiculous. It is just technical difficulties. I am not sure the Wi-Fi here is strong enough for a secure portal connection. The connection is excellent, Miles said. He slid a small silver flash drive across the mahogany table. It stopped inches from Trent's hand. Use the drive. Download the file. It takes 30 seconds. I watched Trent stare at the silver drive. He looked like a man who had just been asked to pick up a live grenade. He knew, and I knew, that the moment he tried to generate a live file, the screen would show a balance near zero. The PDF he had fixed was a work of fiction. The reality was a tragedy. I stepped forward with the water pitcher again, filling Wade's glass. My hand was steady. I caught Trent's eye for a split second. He looked terrified. He looked like a child waiting for the teacher to find the cheat sheet in his pocket. But he could not back down. His ego, the monster my parents had fed for 30 years, would not let him. Fine, Trent said, his voice trembling slightly. If that is what you want, I will send the file. He reached for his laptop. I almost smiled. He was going to try to send the forged PDF anyway. He was going to try to rename it, strip the metadata, and pray Miles was not smart enough to check. He had no idea that the email address he was about to send it to did not just belong to the compliance department. It belonged to me, and I was going to read every single pixel of his lie. Trent froze for a duration that felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds. It was that specific, paralyzed silence of a liar who realizes the walls are not just closing in, but are actually made of glass, and everyone is watching him sweat. He stared at the silver flash drive Miles had slid across the table, then back at his own laptop screen. I could see the calculation running behind his eyes like a glitched computer program. If he refused, he was out. If he used the drive, the real balance of zero would be exposed. He chose the third option, the option of the desperate gambler who thinks he can bluff the house one last time. Fine, Trent said, forcing a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching under a boot. You want digital? I will give you digital. I just do not trust sticking strange drives into my hardware. Security protocol, you know? I will email it directly to the server. Give me the address. Miles did not blink. He did not withdraw the drive. He simply retracted his hand and opened his notebook. Very well, Miles said. I stepped forward before Miles could dictate the address. This was my cue. I needed to ensure the file went exactly where I wanted it. To a server sandbox I had set up specifically to strip mine data for fraud. I apologized for the interruption, keeping my voice low and deferential. The perfect picture of a helpful assistant. Mr. Harrow, the secure compliance inbox for external partners is the admin routed one, correct? Miles nodded once, playing along. I turned to my brother, Trent. Send it to intake-compliance@crestfall-secure.com. Trent typed the address, his fingers moving with aggressive speed. I watched him navigate through his folders. I was standing at an angle where the polarized privacy screen of his laptop did not quite block my view. I saw him bypass the folder labeled banking and click on one labeled desktop. He selected a file. The file name was visible for a split second. Statement_final_October ... PDF ... It was such a clumsy, amateurish name. A real bank export would be a string of alphanumeric nonsense. a date code, or a transaction ID. Statement underscore, final underscore, octi. Was something you named a term paper you finished at 4 in the morning. Sent, Trent announced, hitting the enter key with a flourish. There, it is in the cloud, or the ether, or wherever you people keep your red tape. The room fell silent again. Wade leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned the color of old parchment. He was looking from Trent to Miles, waiting for the verdict. My phone vibrated against my hip. It was a single, sharp buzz. I slipped my hand into my pocket, keeping my face blank. I did not need to look at the screen to know what had happened. The email had arrived. My server had received the attachment, and the automated forensic script I had written the night before was already tearing it apart. Miles tapped his own tablet. Received, he said flatly. He did not smile. He did not say thank you. He did not say it looked good. He simply opened the file. I moved back to the sideboard, turning my back to the room for a moment so I could check my phone. I pulled it out and glanced at the notification. The analysis was complete. It was brutal. The screen showed a breakdown of the PDF's internal architecture. To the naked eye, it probably looked like a pristine statement from Chase or Bank of America showing a balance of $150,000. But to the software, it was a crime scene. Font mismatch. Detected. The numbers in the balance column were in Arial, while the rest of the document was in Helvetica. Layering found. The document was not a flattened image. There was an editing layer sitting on top of the original background, essentially a digital sticker placed over the real number. Metadata timestamp. Creation date was today, 20 minutes ago. Software signature. Adobe Acrobat Pro. Not a banking server generation tool. It was a forgery, and not even a good one. It was the kind of forgery that works on parents who do not know how to convert a Word doc to a PDF. But against a compliance officer, it was an insult. I slid the phone back into my pocket. I felt a surge of cold adrenaline. I had him. I had the smoking gun. Miles looked up from his tablet. He cleared his throat. The file has been ingested, Miles said. We are running the metadata verification now. Trent waved his hand dismissively. Verify away. It is all there. Every penny. He sat back in his chair, straightening his spine. He thought he had won. He thought the silence meant acceptance. He looked over at Wade and winked. Wade let out a long, shuddering breath, his shoulders dropping 2 inches as the tension left his body. He believed the lie because he had to believe it. To believe otherwise would be to admit that his son was a fraud and his own judgment was flawed. See? Celeste chimed in, her voice shrill with vindication. I told you there was nothing to worry about. Trent is a professional. He knows how to handle these things. You people panic over nothing. She glared at me as she said it, as if I were the one who had caused the delay. Miles set the tablet down. He did not mention the mismatched fonts. He did not mention the editing layers. Not yet. That was not the plan. The plan was to let them dig the hole so deep they could never climb out. The funds are pending verification, Miles said, his tone neutral. However, since this is a digital transfer and not a wire that is already cleared, there is a standard clearing period, usually 24 to 48 hours. Trent shrugged. So, I can wait a day. Miles locked eyes with him. The firm cannot. To secure the partnership seat today, effectively immediately as you requested, we require a temporary collateral hold. The air in the room shifted again. The relief that had just settled over Wade evaporated. Collateral? Wade asked, his voice cracking. Yes, Miles replied. A standard bridge security. Since the cash is technically in transit, we need a tangible asset pledged against the buy-in amount, just until the funds clear. Once the bank confirms the transfer is valid, the lien on the collateral is released automatically. It is a formality. Trent frowned. I do not understand. I just sent you the proof. You sent a picture of money. Mr. Chapman, Miles said, sharpening his tone just a fraction. You did not send the money itself until the cash hits our account. The seat is not yours, unless we have security. Celeste laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. Well, that is easy. We have plenty of assets. Trent, just sign whatever they need. Trent looked at Wade. I saw the panic flare up again in my brother's eyes. He knew the money was never going to clear because it did not exist if he pledged collateral. He was pledging it against a ghost. When the bank came back and said the account was empty, the collateral would be seized. But he could not say that. He could not say, "Wait, the money is fake, so do not take the house." He was trapped by his own lie. It is just for 24 hours. Dad, Trent said, turning to Wade. His voice was desperate, pleading. The money is there. You saw the statement. This is just to satisfy the lawyers. It means nothing. Wade hesitated. He looked at the mahogany table, then at his son, then at the view of the city skyline that he so desperately wanted to be part of. Celeste reached over and patted Wade's arm. Honey, do not embarrass Trent. He has done the hard work. He got the invitation. Do not let a little paperwork stop us now. Show them we are serious. Seriously. That was the trigger word. Wade Chapman would do anything to prove he was a serious player. Wade nodded slowly. All right. What do you need? Miles reached into his briefcase again. He pulled out a document bound in a blue cover. I knew exactly what it was. I had drafted it myself. It was a short-term deed of trust. We will need a temporary lien on the primary residence, Miles said, sliding the document toward Wade. The property in Briar Glen, it is the only asset with sufficient equity to cover the buy-in spread. Wade looked at the document. It was the house, his castle, the only thing he actually owned. I stood by the window, watching the scene unfold like a slow-motion car crash. My mother was smiling, convinced her son had conquered the corporate world. My father was reaching for his pen, convinced he was making a savvy business move. My brother was sweating through his expensive shirt, praying that a miracle would happen in the next 24 hours to save him. They were celebrating their victory. I looked at the water glass in my hand. The ice had melted. Go ahead, I thought. Smile, clink your glasses, pop the champagne. Fireworks always look their most beautiful right before they turn into ash and fall into the dirt. Wade uncapped his pen. The document Miles Harrow placed on the table was not thick, but it landed with the heaviness of a tombstone. It was a short-term collateral agreement, a legal tether that would bind the family home in Briar Glen to the fate of Crestfall Partners. I watched my father, Wade, stare at the paper. For the first time all morning, the bluster was gone from his face. The Briar Glen house was the one thing he had not gambled away. It was a sprawling colonial revival with white pillars and a manicured lawn. The kind of place that screamed old money, even though we had bought it with new debt 20 years ago. But he had paid it off. It was his trophy. It was the only piece of ground in the world where he felt like a king and not a debtor. And now, he was being asked to put it on the table like a cheap chip in a poker game. I do not know, Wade said, his voice thick with hesitation. He reached for his water glass, his hand trembling just enough to make the ice rattle. This house is our sanctuary. I promised your mother we would never leverage it again. It is clean. It is ours. Trent leaned in, invading Wade's personal space. The desperation in my brother's eyes was frantic, like a drowning man trying to climb on top of his rescuer. Dad, listen to me, Trent urged, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. It is just for 24 hours, one single day. The money is already in the ether. As soon as it clears, the line dissolves. It is just a piece of paper to make the lawyers happy. Wade looked up at him, searching for reassurance. But 24 hours is a long time in this market. Son, do not do this to me, Trent snapped, losing his patience. Do not embarrass me in front of the partners. I am the new face of this firm. If you back out now, over a formality, I look like a child who needs a permission slip. Is that what you want? You want to humiliate me? Wade flinched. The accusation of humiliation was the sharpest weapon in our family's arsenal. Then Celeste chimed in, and I knew the battle was lost. She was sitting perfectly straight, her eyes cold and hard. She did not look at the document. She looked at her husband with a mixture of challenge and disdain. "Wade, honestly," Celeste said, smoothing her skirt, "do not be so weak. A man who plays in the big leagues takes risks. You always said you had the killer instinct. Well, show it. Do not let your fear ruin Trent's moment. If you cannot sign a simple paper to support your son's future, then maybe you are not the businessman you claim to be." The insult landed exactly where she intended. It hit his fragile ego. Wade straightened his spine, puffing out his chest in a mimicry of courage. He picked up the heavy fountain pen Miles had provided. He hesitated one last time, for a brief, agonizing second. His eyes flicked to the corner of the room where I stood. He looked at me not as a servant, but as a lifeline. I saw the plea in his gaze. He wanted me to step in. He wanted the boring, cautious, risk-averse daughter to find a reason why he could not sign. He wanted me to save him from his own pride. I met his gaze. My face remained a mask of indifference. I did not shake my head. I did not speak. I simply poured more water into the empty glass on my tray. "You taught me that silence is compliance. Father, now, choke on it." Wade looked back at the paper. The moment passed. His pride grabbed his hand and forced it to move. "Fine," Wade said, his voice rough. "For the family." He signed his name with a flourish, the scratch of the nib loud in the silent room. Then he pushed the document toward Miles. "There," Wade said, exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. "Done. The house is the collateral. It is fully paid off. Title is clear. You can check the county records if you like." Miles did not pull the document toward him immediately. Instead, he tapped the screen of his tablet. He had been running a real-time title search while they argued, connected to the county clerk's database through the high-speed link I had provided. "Thank you. Mr. Chapman," Miles said. His tone did not change, but the rhythm of his speech slowed down, becoming deliberate and dangerous. "However, before we notarize this, there is a discrepancy we need to address." Wade frowned. "Discrepancy? What are you talking about?" "The title is clean. I paid the mortgage off 3 years ago. We had a party." Miles turned the tablet around so the screen faced the table. "According to the Registrar of Deeds, updated as of this morning," Miles said, "there is indeed a primary mortgage release recorded 3 years ago. However, there is an active secondary lien on the property, a home equity line of credit, fully drawn down to the limit of $200,000. The room went dead silent. It was a silence deeper than the one before. This was the silence of a bomb that had already detonated, and the sound just had not caught up to the blast yet. Wade stared at the screen. "That is impossible," he stammered. "That is a mistake, a clerical error. I never took out a second mortgage." "It is not an error," Miles said, tapping a specific line on the digital document. "The lien was executed 18 months ago. The notarized signature is on file. It lists the borrower as Celeste Chapman." Wade froze. He turned his head slowly, mechanically, toward his wife. Celeste was no longer smiling. The color had drained from her face so completely that her makeup looked like a mask painted on a corpse. She was staring at her hands, which were clenched in her lap. "Celeste?" Wade whispered. His voice was unrecognizable. It sounded like something broken. She did not answer. "Celeste!" Wade roared, slamming his hand on the table. She flinched, her composure shattering. "I had to," she cried out, her voice shrill and desperate. "It was last year. Trent was in trouble with that investment group in Miami. They were going to hurt him. Wade, he needed the money fast. And you said we were tight on cash, and I could not let anything happen to him." Trent stood up, knocking his chair back. He looked at his mother with a mixture of horror and fury, but not because she had betrayed their father. No, Trent was horrified because her secret had just nuked his secret. "You took out a loan on the house?" Trent screamed. "You told me the house was safe. I based my entire leverage plan on the house being clear." "I did it for you," Celeste sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "I paid off your debts. I thought I could pay it back slowly before your father noticed. I was protecting you. You ruined everything, Trent yelled, pacing the room like a caged animal. Now the collateral is worthless. The equity is gone. Wade sat slumped in his chair. He looked small, the powerful patriarch, the man who demanded respect, had just realized that the two people he worshipped, his wife and his son, had been cannibalizing his life behind his back. He had been strutting around his castle, unaware that the termites had already eaten the foundation. I watched from the corner, feeling a cold, dark satisfaction settle in my chest. I knew about the second mortgage. I had seen it in the credit report weeks ago. I knew Celeste had forged Wade's signature on the spousal consent form, or at least coerced a notary to look the other way. I could have warned them. I could have told Wade his kingdom was already sold. But I needed this moment. I needed them to strip each other bare. Miles cleared his throat, bringing the room back to the brutal reality of the business deal. The revelation of the hidden mortgage hung in the air like toxic smoke. Choking off the oxygen in the room, my mother was weeping into her hands, a performance of victimhood that might have worked on my father 20 years ago, but now just looked pathetic. My father, Wade, looked as though someone had reached into his chest and removed his spine. He stared at the table, unable to process that his financial fortress was actually a house of cards built by his wife's secret desperation. But Miles Harrow did not care about family trauma. He cared about leverage. Because the primary collateral is compromised, Miles said, his voice cutting through Celeste's sobbing. Crestfall Partners requires an additional layer of security. We cannot accept a property with a secondary lien as the sole guarantee for a partner buy-in. It is too volatile. He slid the final document toward Trent. This is a personal guarantee and indemnity agreement. Miles explained. It states that you, Trent Chapman, are personally liable for the full buy-in amount of $150,000, plus legal fees and damages, should the funds fail to clear for any reason. Furthermore, it contains an immediate default clause. Trent wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. What does that mean? Immediate default? It means, Miles said, leaning forward slightly, that if we discover any material misrepresentation in your application, whether it is the source of funds, your employment history, or the validity of the bank statement you just sent, the contract is voided instantly. You are terminated as a partner before you even start, and the debt becomes due immediately, not in 30 days, immediately. Trent's face turned a shade of violent red. He slammed his hand on the table. "This is insulting," Trent shouted. "I am the new partner. I am the talent you people hunted down. You cannot treat me like a criminal just because my mother made a mistake with the house paperwork. I have rights." Miles did not blink. He did not flinch. He simply placed a finger on the document. "You have no rights yet, Mr. Chapman," Miles said coldly. "Until you sign this, you are just a guest in this building. If you want the seat, you sign. If you do not want to sign, you can leave. The door is behind you." The room went silent. Trent looked at the door. I could see the wheels turning in his head. If he walked out now, he would have to admit defeat. He would have to go home and tell his friends that the big announcement was a lie. He would have to face the creditors without the shield of a prestigious job title. His ego was a starving beast, and it would not let him leave the table. He looked at Wade. "Dad? Say something. Tell him this is standard negotiation." Wade looked up. For a moment, I saw a flicker of clarity in his eyes. He looked at Trent, really looked at him, and saw the panic, the sweat, the incompetence. He wanted to stop. He wanted to say, "Enough, let us go home." But then he looked at me standing in the corner, the witness to his shame, and his pride slammed the door shut. He could not admit he had been wrong about his golden boy for 3 decades. "Sign it," Wade whispered, his voice hoarse. "Just sign it, son. We have to move forward. There is no going back now." Trent gritted his teeth. He grabbed the pen. He told himself, I am sure, that he would never get caught. He believed that once he was inside the company, he could charm his way out of any audit. He believed the rules did not apply to him because they never had before. He scribbled his signature on the line. There, Trent spat. Happy? Miles pulled the document back and checked the signature. He placed it neatly into his folder. We are not finished, Miles said. Now that the guarantee is active, I need to complete the final anti-money laundering verification. This involves a verbal confirmation of your asset liquidity. Trent groaned. I already sent you the file. Miles ignored him. I need you to answer for the record. Where exactly are the funds currently held? Trent blinked. He shifted in his seat. They are in my checking account. Chase Bank. Miles made a note on his pad. Chase Bank. Checking? Interesting. Because 5 minutes ago, you mentioned to your father that the money was coming from an investment portfolio. Trent stiffened. Well, yes, I moved it. I liquidated a stock position and moved it to checking. It is the same thing. Miles did not look up. And when exactly did this liquidation happen? Yesterday. Trent said quickly. Miles paused. Yesterday was a federal holiday. The markets were closed. The silence that followed was excruciating. Trent's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. I put the order in before the holiday. Trent stammered. It was executed this morning. Or maybe Friday. I have a broker who handles it. I do not watch the minute-by-minute details. I am a big-picture guy. So the money is currently in transit? Miles asked. Or is it settled in the checking account? It is pending, Trent said, his voice rising in pitch. It is there, but it shows as pending. That is why I cannot generate a live statement yet. Banks are slow. You know how it is. Miles wrote something down. He did not say, I know you are lying. He simply let Trent talk. He let Trent dig the hole deeper with every contradiction. So first, it was in the account. Miles summarized. Then it was an investment. Now it is pending, and you are claiming this delay is due to a federal holiday, despite the fact that electronic transfers are automated. It is coming, Trent yelled, losing his composure entirely. Why are you grilling me? The money is good. Celeste, sensing that her son was cracking under the pressure, did what she always did. She looked for a target to divert the negative energy. Her eyes locked onto me. Scarlett, she shrieked. I looked up from my position by the wall. Yes. Mother? For God's sake, stop hovering there like a vulture. Celeste snapped. Can't you see your brother is parched? This is a high-level negotiation, and you are just standing there staring. Go get some coffee. Real coffee, not that instant trash from the break room. Go down to the lobby. She was trying to get me out of the room. She thought my presence was the bad omen that was causing Trent to stumble. She wanted to preserve the illusion of professionalism, unaware that the only unprofessional people in the room were her and her son. I nodded. Of course, I will go right now. I walked toward the door, my heels clicking on the floor. As I passed the heavy oak sideboard near the entrance, I reached into my pocket. I did not take out my wallet. I took out my work phone. I had consulted with my own lawyer the day before, in this state, and under the specific corporate bylaws of the entity I now controlled. Recording a meeting where fraud was suspected was entirely legal, especially since I was the majority creditor in the room, even if they did not know it yet. I swiped the screen and hit the red button on the voice recorder app. I placed the phone face down on the sideboard, hidden behind a decorative vase. It was perfectly positioned to capture every desperate lie my family was about to tell. I opened the door and stepped out, but I did not go to the elevators. I stood just outside, watching the scene through the gap in the glass frosting. Inside, Miles waited until the door clicked shut. Now that the staff has left, Miles said, his voice dropping an octave. Let me be crystal clear. Trent looked at him, sweat dripping down his temple. We are going to verify these conflicting statements with the bank directly, Miles said. If the funds are not exactly where you said they are, or if that PDF you sent is found to be altered in any way, the consequences will be severe. Trent tried to laugh, but it came out as a choke. You are trying to scare me. I am not trying to do anything, Miles replied. I am informing you. If we find fraud, your partnership is revoked. And that personal guarantee you just signed? It has a retroactive effect. It means we will come for your assets, and your parents' assets, to cover the breach of contract costs. Trent looked at Wade. Wade looked at the floor. I stood in the hallway, counting the seconds. The trap was not just set. It had already snapped shut on their necks. They just had not felt the pain yet. I turned and walked toward the elevators to get the coffee. I wanted to make sure I had a fresh cup in my hand when I came back to deliver the final blow. I set the silver tray of coffee down on the sideboard with a deliberate, heavy clank that cut through the silence of the room. The sound was sharp enough to make Wade flinch. I did not offer anyone a cup. I did not ask who wanted cream or sugar. Instead, I walked past my mother, past the empty chair where I was supposed to sit in silence, and walked straight to the head of the conference table. I stood directly behind the empty chairman's seat, resting my hands on the leather backrest. Celeste looked up, her face streaked with mascara tears, her expression shifting from misery to confusion. She blinked, as if she were seeing a hallucination. To her, I was the invisible girl. The background noise, seeing me take the position of authority, was like watching a lamp try to give orders. "Scarlett?" Celeste rasped, her voice trembling. "What are you doing? Sit down. Do not make this worse." I ignored her. I took my phone out of my pocket, the same phone that had been recording their confession, and tapped the screen, using the admin credentials I had acquired, along with the debt purchase. I overrode the conference room's audio-visual system, the large 4K monitor on the wall, which had been displaying a generic Crestfall logo, flickered black for a second. When it came back on, it displayed a single, crisp legal document. At the top, in bold letters, was the name of a company my family had never heard of. Marigold Ridge Holdings, LLC. Wade squinted at the screen, wiping his glasses. "What is this?" he asked, his voice weak. "Who are these people?" "They are the people who own you," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough to fill every corner of the room. Trent looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Is this another compliance thing?" "Because I told you. I am done jumping through hoops." I tapped my phone again. The screen shifted to a flowchart. It showed Crestfall Partners' debt structure, highlighting a massive block of short-term liabilities that had been transferred yesterday afternoon. The arrow pointed directly to Marigold Ridge Holdings. "Crestfall is not recruiting partners." "Trent," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "They are insolvent. They are selling seats to pay the electric bill. They are drowning. And the only reason the lights are still on in this building is because a new investor stepped in yesterday and bought their distressed debt." I paused, letting the information land. That investor bought the controlling interest. I continued, "Which means that investors have the right to vote on board decisions, veto new hires, and seize assets in the event of a default." Wade shook his head, looking utterly lost. "I do not understand. Why are you showing us this? Who is Marigold Ridge?" I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of their lungs. Wade's mouth fell open. "You?" he stammered. "You bought the debt?" I nodded. "I bought the debt. I control the voting rights. Which means, simply put, I decide who gets to walk into this company. And I decide who gets thrown out." Trent stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "You are lying," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You do not have that kind of money. You are a risk analyst. You make peanuts. I make smart investments." "Trent," I replied, my voice dropping to a chill. "Unlike you, I do not bet on miracles. I bet on leverage. And right now, I have all of it." I swiped my phone screen again. The flowchart disappeared, replaced by the forensic analysis of the PDF Trent had emailed 10 minutes ago. It was blown up to massive proportions, every flaw exposed in high definition. The red boxes highlighted the mismatched fonts. The timestamps showed the file was created this morning. The metadata tag clearly read, "Edited with Adobe Acrobat." Trent's face went white. He looked like a ghost. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is what we in the industry call a fabricated instrument. You did not just lie. Trent, You committed wire fraud. You sent a forged document to a compliance server to secure a financial position. Trent looked around the room, frantic. It is just a draft, he stammered, his voice cracking. I sent the wrong file. It was a mock-up. I was just testing the system. I cut him off. My voice was like a whip crack. A mock-up is not sent to prove liquidity. I said, a draft is not used to sign a personal guarantee. That is a lie, and you know it. And because you sent it, you have triggered the default clause in the contract you just signed. I turned to Miles. Mr. Harrow? Miles stood up. He closed his notebook and capped his pen. The deferential, robotic demeanor dropped away instantly. He looked at Trent with open contempt. I am not working for Crestfall. Trent, Miles said, his voice deep and authoritative. And I am certainly not working for you. I was hired by Marigold Ridge Holdings to conduct a forensic audit of incoming partners. He turned to me and gave a small, respectful nod. I reported to Ms. Chapman. Miles finished. Celeste let out a gasp that sounded like a sob. She looked from Miles to me, her eyes wide with a terrifying realization. The daughter she had dismissed, the girl she had told to fetch coffee, was the one holding the axe. Scarlet. Celeste whined, her voice shifting instantly from arrogant command to pathetic begging. Please, do not do this. He is your brother. He made a mistake. We can fix it. Do not be dramatic. We are family. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had just mortgaged her home to save the son who had failed her a dozen times. While telling me I was only good for cleaning up messes, I am not being dramatic. Mother, I said, I am being professional. You wanted me to learn from Trent? You wanted me to have the killer instinct? Well, here it is. I turned back to Trent. He was leaning against the table, looking as if he might vomit. Trent Chapman, I said, my voice echoing in the glass room. Your application for partnership is denied due to verified fraud. Your access to this building is revoked. And regarding the seat you thought you bought, I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the mahogany table, claiming it as my own. Actually, I said, savoring the words, you are fired. Trent stared at me, his eyes wide and vacant. Get out of my boardroom, I added softly, before I have security drag you out. The silence that followed my termination of Trent lasted exactly 3 seconds before it detonated. My brother did not hang his head in shame. He did not apologize. Instead, his face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He lunged toward the table, slamming his fist down on the mahogany surface so hard that the water glasses jumped. You are a liar, Trent screamed, spit flying from his mouth. You are a fraud. Scarlet, you think you can just walk in here and steal my company? This is a hostile takeover. It is illegal. I am calling the police right now. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. Go ahead, I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria like a razor. Call them. I am sure the Economic Crimes Division would love to hear about the forged financial instrument you just emailed to a compliance server. I slid a thin folder across the table. It stopped directly in front of Wade. Inside, I continued, you will find the board minutes from yesterday, authenticated and notarized. You will find the transfer of debt assignment signed by the previous creditor, and you will find the notice of control that legally designates me as the acting decision-maker for Crestfall's liabilities. Wade opened the folder. His hands were trembling. He stared at the documents, his eyes scanning the legal jargon that dismantled his entire worldview. He read the clauses that gave me power. He read the numbers that proved his son's partnership was nothing more than a donation to a dying entity. Wade slumped back in his chair. It was a physical collapse, as if his skeleton had suddenly dissolved. For 30 years, he had built an empire in his mind, a dynasty where he was the king and Trent was the prince. He had sacrificed his savings, his integrity, and his relationship with his daughter to fuel that fantasy. Now, looking at the ink on the page, the fantasy evaporated. He was not a king. He was just an old man with a mountain of debt and a son who was a criminal. My God, Wade whispered, his voice sounding hollow. It is all true. You own it. You actually own it. Celeste, however, was not ready to accept defeat. She stood up, her face flushed with a toxic mix of embarrassment and fury. She looked at the documents, then at me, and her eyes narrowed into slits. You planned this, she hissed. You jealous, spiteful little girl. You could not stand seeing your brother succeed. Could you? You had to ruin it. You had to humiliate us. How could you be so cruel to your own family? I looked at her, feeling absolutely nothing, the sting of her words, which used to make me cry in my bedroom when I was 16, now felt like a breeze against a stone wall. I am not the one who forged a bank statement. Mother, I said calmly, and I am not the one who secretly mortgaged the family home to cover up a gambling debt. Celeste flinched, but she pivoted instantly. The anger melted into a theatrical performance of victimhood. She clasped her hands together, tears welling up in her eyes on command. Scarlett, please, she wailed, reaching out as if to grab my hand. We are in trouble. Your father's heart cannot take this. You have the power now. You can fix this. Just tear up the papers. Let Trent have the seat. We can work it out later. Be the bigger person. Save your family. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Attack, then beg. Guilt, then obligation. Trent saw the opening. He realized that legal threats were not working. So he decided to go for the emotional jugular. He straightened his tie, a sneer curling his lip. Do not bother. Mom, Trent said, his voice dripping with venom. She has always been like this. Cold, unlovable. That is why she has no friends. Scarlett, that is why you are 30 years old and alone. You think buying a company makes you important? You are still just the invisible sister, the one nobody wanted to talk to at parties. You are doing this because it is the only way you can get Daddy to look at you. He leaned in, his eyes gleaming with malice. Go ahead. Fire me, Trent taunted. It won't change the fact that I am the one they love. You are just the bank, and nobody loves the bank. I stood perfectly still. Miles Harrow shifted uncomfortably, ready to step in, but I held up a hand to stop him. Trent wanted me to scream. He wanted me to cry, to throw the water pitcher at him, to prove that I was just an emotional, hysterical woman who didn't belong in the boardroom. He wanted to drag me down into the mud so he could beat me with experience. I did not give him the satisfaction. I picked up the remote for the screen and turned it off. The room went dim. Are you finished? I asked. Trent blinked, confused by my lack of reaction. Because if you are done with the therapy session. I said, my tone as dry as dust. We have business to conclude. I pulled a final document from my bag. I did not slide it. I placed it in the center of the table. This is the deal, I said, and it is the only one you are going to get. I pointed to the paper. 1. Trent signs this voluntary termination agreement. It includes a formal admission that the financial documents provided were incorrect. It bars him from ever representing Crestfall or contacting its clients. 2. Wade and Celeste agree to an immediate restructuring of the household debt. I will personally purchase the secondary mortgage from the lender to prevent foreclosure. But the title of the house transfers to a trust controlled by me until every cent is repaid. Trent stared at me. You want to take the house? I am saving the house, so I corrected him. Because if I walk out that door right now and file this fraud report with the authorities, the bank will call that loan tomorrow, and you will be on the street by Tuesday. I looked at all three of them. Option A. You sign. We close this chapter, and nobody goes to jail. Option B. I hand this flash drive to Miles, who is legally obligated to report felonies to the regulatory board. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the hard drive in Trent's laptop. Wade looked up. He looked at Trent, then at Celeste. For the first time in his life, he did not look to them for permission. He looked at me with something that resembled fear, or perhaps respect. She is right, Wade said quietly. What? Trent snapped. She is right. Trent! Wade's voice rose to a shout, startling everyone. You lied. You lied to me about the money. You lied to me about the partners. And your mother lied about the mortgage. Wade turned to me, his hands shaking. Scarlett, if we sign, you won't report him? I won't report him. I said, but he leaves. Now. And he never comes back. Celeste's face turned purple. She was losing control. The narrative she had spun for years, that they were the perfect family and I was the problem, was disintegrating. She needed to hurt someone. She needed to deflect the blame. You cannot make him sign that, Celeste shrieked at Wade. It is a trap. She is trying to steal his inheritance, just like she tried to steal the money from Aunt Linda. The room frozen. Trent's head snapped toward his mother. Mom, shut up. But Celeste was too far gone. She pointed a trembling finger at me. You think you are so holy? We had to borrow that money from Linda's estate because you refused to help us. Trent needed that seed money for the crypto investment, and you sat on your high horse and said, no. So we took it. It was a loan. I stared at her. My blood ran cold. Aunt Linda had died 2 years ago. I was the executor. The estate had been settled. Or so I thought. But there was a small trust account for education that I had signed over to my parents to manage for family emergencies. You took the education trust? I asked. My voice barely a whisper. The money for your grandchildren's future? You gave it to Trent for crypto? Trent closed his eyes. He knew he was done. Celeste clamped her hand over her mouth. Realizing too late what she had admitted, she had just confessed to embezzlement on top of mortgage fraud. I looked at them. I looked at the 3 people who shared my DNA. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the feeling of a heavy chain finally breaking and falling to the floor. I realized then that revenge was not the goal. Revenge implies that I still care about their opinion. Revenge implies that I want them to feel my pain. I didn't want that anymore. I just wanted to be free. I wanted to close the book on this toxic, draining saga and walk out of the theater. I am adding an addendum to the agreement, I said, my voice flat. You will repay the trust fund. That will be the first lien on the house. I pushed the pen toward Trent. Sign it, I said, or Miles makes the call. Trent looked at the pen. He looked at his mother, who was sobbing into her hands. He looked at his father, who refused to meet his eyes. He realized he had no allies left in the room. He grabbed the pen. He scrawled his signature on the termination paper, pressing down so hard the tip nearly tore the paper. He looked up at me. His eyes were not defeated. They were cold, calculating, and filled with a hateful promise. He was signing the paper to save his skin, but I could see the gears turning. He was already thinking of a way to burn the building down on his way out. I signed. Trent spat. Now give me my laptop. I have personal files I need to clear. I reached out and took the paper. The laptop stays. I said, it is company property, and so are you, until security escorts you out. Trent stood up, his jaw clenched tight. He buttoned his jacket, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. You think you won, he whispered as he passed me. But you do not know half of what I have done. I watched him walk toward the door. I knew he wasn't done. A narcissist never accepts defeat. They only plan their next attack. But I was ready. I had bought the debt. I owned the arena. And if he wanted to come back for round 2, he would find the doors locked and the lights off. Miles stepped forward. Shall I call security? Please, I said, turning my back on my family to look out the window at the city below, and change the Wi-Fi password. Trent stopped with his hand on the brass handle of the conference room door. He did not open it. Instead, he turned back to face me, and the look of defeat on his face had curdled into something far more volatile. It was a look of pure, destructive spite. He reached into his inner suit pocket, but not for a pen. He pulled out his phone. You think you are smart, Trent sneered, his thumbs flying across the screen with manic speed. You think you can just cut me out and keep the company afloat? Let us see how much this firm is worth when every client in the Rolodex finds out It is being run by a hostile creditor. He tapped the screen aggressively. There, he announced, his voice trembling with malicious triumph. I just sent a blast email to the entire partner list and the top 50 clients. Subject line, corporate theft. I told them you forced the board to resign and that the company is under investigation for fraud. I told them to pull their capital immediately, if I am going down. Scarlett, I am taking the whole ship with me. Wade stood up, his face turning the color of ash. Trent, what have you done? You just destroyed the family reputation. Trent laughed. A high-pitched, jagged sound. I destroyed your reputation. Dad, you destroyed mine the moment you let her take the chair. Now, watch the stock price hit zero. I stood perfectly still at the head of the table. I did not rush to grab his phone. I did not scream. I simply looked at Miles Harrow. Mr. Harrow, I said, my voice calm, almost bored. What is the status of the outgoing mail server? Miles checked his tablet, his face illuminated by the cool blue light of the screen. The outbound queue is quarantined, Miles reported, as of 3 minutes ago. All communication privileges for user Trent Chapman were suspended. The mass email he just attempted to send has been flagged by the firewall as a malicious internal threat. It is currently sitting in the secure hold folder. Trent froze. His thumb hovered over the screen. What? I walked around the table, closing the distance between us. Did you really think I would leave the communication channels open while I was firing you? I asked, the moment I took control of the debt. I took control of the IT infrastructure. Your email did not go to the clients. Trent, it went to a private server evidence log. Miles tapped the screen again. We have the draft, Miles confirmed. It is a textbook example of corporate sabotage and libel. By attempting to send this, you have just provided the final piece of evidence required to validate the termination with cause. You also violated the non-disparagement clause of the document you just refused to sign. Trent stared at his phone as if it had betrayed him. The signal bars were full, but he was completely cut off from the world he was trying to burn down. Wade sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He was making a sound that was halfway between a sob and a groan. Trent looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. The malice was gone, replaced by the terrified realization that he was not the hero, nor the villain. He was just a nuisance. You rigged it, Trent stammered. I secured it. I corrected him. Wade looked up, his eyes pleading. Scarlett, please, stop this. He is just angry. Do not let this go further. If you file that evidence, he will never work in finance again. Just let him go. We will leave. We will go home. Just do not make it a legal matter. I looked at my father. Even now, after everything, he was still trying to shield the son who had just tried to incinerate us all. I was about to answer, to perhaps offer one last mercy, when a sharp, electronic chirping sound filled the room. It was not my phone. It was the landline on the conference table, the direct line to the compliance officer. Miles reached over and pressed the speaker button. This is Harrow, Miles said. A robotic, synthesized voice filled the room. Alert, automated system flag. Financial instrument verification failed. The document labeled Statement Final, October PDF, has been confirmed as fraudulent by the issuing bank, API. This is a mandatory reporting event under Section 3 of the Banking Transparency Act. The room went deathly silent. That was not me. I said softly to Wade, that is the system. I told you, Dad. Once the machine starts, it does not care who your father is. Trent let out a strangled cry. He knew what that alert meant. It meant the police were the next logical step. He turned and yanked the door open, sprinting into the hallway. He did not get far. As he rounded the corner toward the elevators, 2 uniformed security guards stepped out from the alcove where they had been waiting. I had not called the police, but I had removed Trent's name from the building's guest registry 10 minutes ago. Technically, he was now trespassing. One guard caught him by the arm. The other stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Mr. Chapman? The guard asked. We need to escort you to the exit. You are no longer authorized to be on this floor. Get off me, Trent screamed. Struggling against the guard's grip, I am a partner. I own this place. Tell them, Dad. Tell them who I am. I walked out of the conference room, followed by Miles. Wade and Celeste trailed behind, looking like mourners at a funeral. I walked up to Trent. He was panting, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder from his struggle. He looked at me, his eyes wild and desperate. Scarlett, tell them, Trent begged. Tell them it is a mistake. I reached into the folder Miles was holding and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the notice of termination. I held it out to him. You wanted to be the new partner, I said, my voice steady and clear. You wanted the title. You wanted the glory. But you forgot that a title has to be earned, not stolen. This company is not your stage anymore. Trent, it is a business, and you are bad for business. I tucked the paper into the pocket of his ruined suit. This is a restraining order and a termination notice, effective immediately. I said, if you try to access our systems, contact our clients, or step foot within 500 feet of this building, the evidence of your fraud goes directly to the district attorney. Trent slumped in the guard's grip. The fight went out of him. He looked at the floor, defeated not by force, but by the absolute, crushing weight of reality. Celeste let out a wail behind me. She collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the carpet. She was crying for the loss of her illusion. Her golden boy was not a genius. He was a criminal. Her husband was not a tycoon. He was a broke old man. And the daughter she had ignored was the only one standing tall. No one went to help her. Wade stood frozen, staring at his son. I turned to my parents. Regarding the house, I said, keeping my tone strictly professional, I have already instructed my legal team to purchase the secondary mortgage from the lender. I am paying it off today. Wade looked at me, hope flickering in his eyes. You are saving the house? I am securing the asset. I corrected. You and Mom will continue to live there, but the deed transfers to a trust in my name. You will pay rent to the trust equal to the property taxes and insurance. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot sell it. You cannot use it to bail Trent out of jail. It is my house. You are just guests. Celeste looked up, her mascara running down her cheeks. You are stealing our home? I am ensuring you have a roof over your heads. I said, because if I leave it in your name, Trent will talk you into gambling it away again within 6 months. And I refuse to let my inheritance turn into a pile of ash because you cannot say no to him. I signaled to the guards. Take him out. I said. The guards hauled Trent toward the elevator bank. The doors slid open with a cheerful ding. As they dragged him inside, a group of real employees, analysts and associates, stepped out. They stopped, staring at the man who had been strutting around the office an hour ago, claiming to be their new boss, now being ejected like a drunk from a bar. Trent tried to hide his face, but it was too late. He had wanted an audience. Now he had one. I stood by the elevator doors as they began to close. I looked my brother in the eye one last time. My brother bragged he was the new partner. I said, my voice quiet but carrying perfectly in the silent hallway, actually, you are fired. The doors slid shut, cutting off his face from view. I turned back to the empty hallway. My parents were still standing there, broken and small. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt the clean, cold relief of a balance sheet that finally added up. I walked past them, back toward the boardroom. I had a company to save. And for the first time in my life, I did not have to ask for permission to do it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Monica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people.